Welcome and good evening. It's really our pleasure. The Jewish Federation of the Lehigh Valley and Jewish Family Service are pleased to co-sponsor tonight's program, the continuation of a discussion on identity, power, and privilege. In this encore presentation, we're pleased to welcome back David Jones, who has led private, public, nonprofit, and faith-based organizations. He has been a businessman, a county commissioner, an agency exec, and he founded and leads the New Vision Church, in addition to serving on many community boards. I don't want to take much time this evening. I'd like us to be able to spend more of the time in the conversation. And so I'm going to turn it over to David. Again, David, thank you for joining us. We're really delighted to host this program with Jewish Family Service.
Well, good evening to everyone. I am honored to be with you again. I am always amazed and humbled that folks would actually come back again to listen to what I have to say. I'm really honored about that. We had a great conversation last time, and we are continuing on that conversation. And today we want to be able to focus more specifically on microaggressions. So I want to welcome all of you to the Zoom platform. Aaron, if you could give me screen share ability, I could bring up the PowerPoint. I think we've got a really great conversation and discussion tonight. And again, I want to thank all of those responsible, Jewish Family Services, the Federation, Rabbi Jude, who I'm getting to know more and more on a personal level, for giving me the opportunity to come and to share with you. So let me bring up my PowerPoint and we will maximize our time. Okay, now just for facilitation purposes, we will have one group discussion. Aaron, if you could set it up for 10 minutes, and I'll let you know when the appropriate time is for that, and we'll give you a little bit of coaching on how that process works. So let's get right into our conversation. We are talking about bias and microaggressions. Now, microaggressions, that's a big, scary word. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes associated with microaggressions. And, you know, in this space and time, particularly where we find ourselves as a nation, there's all kinds of things that are being thrown around, phrases and words that can oftentimes seem so overwhelming. Our goal today is simple. This is what our agenda is. Our agenda is to talk about stereotypes, implicit bias, and then how do those things feed into microaggressions? They are all linked together: stereotypes, implicit bias, and microaggressions. So here's what I'd like us to do, to jump right in to a group exercise and discussion. I want you to take some time, 10 minutes in groups, and I want you to talk about when you grew up in your household. What were the messages about race that you heard growing up in your family systems? What were the messages? Good, bad, don't morally judge them. Just what did I hear around the kitchen table? What did I hear in my household about the they and the thems and the we and the us's? And this will help to inform our continued conversation relative to stereotypes and biases. So, Aaron, if you are ready, here's what we're going to do. We're going to kick everybody into small groups. How many of us? There are 40. So, Aaron, I don't know how many groups she set up. 8, 5?
5 groups, so 5 to 6 per group.
Okay, great. 5, 6 per group. What's going to happen? There's going to be a thing that comes on your screen. Click yes, I want to go into the small group. When you go into the small group, you'll have 10 minutes. There'll be a timer that'll let you know how much time is left. Have your discussion. Make sure you make room for everybody else's input and conversation, right? And then when it's done, when the 10 minutes is up, it'll kick you right back into the main session where I will be here waiting with you to take the information, the discussion, kind of translate it into some usable framework for us as we move forward. So with that, let's kick into our small groups. What were the things you heard about race and others when you were growing up in your family systems? 10 minutes. Hope everybody had a stimulating conversation. Let's real quickly, let's get a couple. Let's say we can get a couple of quick debriefs of someone want to share some of the insights, some of the learnings from some of their small groups. Things that we heard, that we experienced in our family systems, in our household about race or others.
The common theme, I don't know if it was 100% or not, but that as Jewish people growing up in the 50s, what we agreed that we heard a fair amount of was degradation of Black people, Schwarze this, Schwarze that, and that was the part of our socialization when we were very young.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else?
Anything
different to add?
Several of us, I think, grew up in communities with very small Black populations, and I think the other really was Christians. For my family, were Holocaust survivors, and even for others in the group, we basically hung out with other members of the Jewish community and had a certain level of distrust, discomfort with people who weren't Jewish.
I agree.
So you grow up with this.
I was just going to
go ahead. I'm sorry. Someone was going to say something.
I was just going to say, Rabbi, that I agree. The idea of that it was just Black people that were denigrated. Yeah, I didn't mean to leave that impression. So it was right. It was everyone else.
So the reality is, most of us, when we grow up in family systems, we are taught, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to have a certain perspective, bias, if you will, about the them and the they, and the we and the us, right? Doesn't even have to be about race as much as there's a we and us, and we're okay. We and us, we're good. It's the them and the they that you have to watch out for, because you know them and they, you know what they always do. You know what they say about them. All of these things go to shape and impact and affect how we think. Not only how we think, but they affect our biases that we develop as adults. I want to take you through a very, very quick kind of simple review, talking about blind spots, and then we're going to jump into talking about microaggressions, right? So this was a great seeding conversation. So all of us, at some level, some degree, we have these blind spots that have been programmed into us, blind spots about the them and the they and the we and us. And even though we are consciously aware of their input, we are not always consciously aware of how they influence, shape, condition our filter, our lenses, how we see and perceive the world, how we see and perceive others. So when you think about blind spots, you think about implicit associations that we harbor in our mind. We associate people and things, you know, as human beings, our brains are wired and conditioned to associate things. Think about your cabinet. Well, maybe not so. My wife is very particular about the cabinet. The vegetables have to be with the vegetables, and the cans of fruit got to be with the cans of fruit. Everything's got to be, you know, by nature, we categorize things as human beings. We have these implicit associations. It's how we kind of make sense of the world. And we have these feelings and attitudes about other people based upon these associations, these characteristics, race, ethnicity, age, and appearance. These are developed from the time that we're young all the way through to the time that we become older. We talked about this last week, and this is really important to understand the psychology and how the brain works, how the brain is designed to function. So when you think about the amygdala, this very, very small pea-sized thing in our brain, it's the size of an almond. It's where all of our emotions and our memories are stored in our brain. It's what drives and create neural pathways, and it's the neural pathways that create the connections, the associations. So when I see a them and the they, right, it's that neural pathway within my amygdala that associates the messaging that I heard growing up, whether it was in my household or the messaging that society has conditioned in me about the them and the theys. That's how that stuff gets connected. And all of this is happening and we're not aware. And that amygdala controls the fight or flight mechanism. This is the survival mechanism in us. If you most of us here on the Zoom, we are not evolutionists, we are creationists. But evolutionists will say that it was the amygdala that enabled man to survive because it was his preservation mode. It told him whether he needed to run or whether he needed to fight. The amygdala, the brain. So all of this stuff that you heard growing up, all of these messages on TV and in music and in media and in the news about the them and the they. And we're talking specifically about issues of race and color, but it's broad in general because as a community, as a Jewish community, you can certainly understand and relate to the many different types of negative stereotypes that people have projected and that you've experienced. And all of this is driven by our brains and how our brains operate and how our brains function, what we get exposed to as young people, what we're exposed to in society. But here's the opportunity we have. All of our biases can be changed. They can be unlearned, and they can be replaced with new mental associations. So the things that we think that we've heard about the them and the they growing up, those perceptions, those associations, they can be unlearned. They can be changed. We are not stuck with our programming. And that's really important to lay this foundation that when we are talking about microaggressions, what we are really talking about is this relationship that exists between stereotypes, the messaging, the associations that I am trained and conditioned with growing up as an adult in society, and the biases, the subconscious attitudes and perceptions that are formulated by those stereotypes. Those two connected elements are what inform and drive microaggressions. So I'm gonna stop right there. Any thoughts or questions so far? None? Great. I've got a great little video for us to watch. We're gonna jump in now. We're gonna talk about microaggressions. And I've got
actually have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Amy, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're going to get into this, but So you're saying that these thoughts, the stereotypes that we've heard growing up and what we think can be changed. Will you be getting into at some point how to go about changing them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will.
Okay, then I'll wait. Okay.
I just have one quick question. From looking at your slides, would you say we are born this way, meaning hatred and racism, or we learn it after we're born?
It is a learned condition. You take little kids and you watch little kids together, little kids have no problem with each other. It is part of programming and conditioning and exposure. No one's born a racist. No one's born a bigot. You're conditioned and programmed to be that way. So let's jump into talking about microaggressions. And I got a video here. Let me see, make sure this plays right. Here we go. Wait a minute, that didn't go right. Hold on.
David, when you're sharing your screen, you have to click on share volume from your computer too. Otherwise, we won't be able to hear it.
All rise.
All right, what did you see in the video? And there wasn't really any sound with it except the background music. What did you see in the video?
People were looking at the gentleman, making assumptions of who he was
Mm-hmm.
or what he might do.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else, or is that about captures it?
That captures it.
I can tell you, as an individual who served on the county board of commissioners, I had the honor for 3 terms. Can't believe people voted for me that many times to serve the citizens of Lehigh County. Even as a county commissioner, if I was in environments or spaces and people did not know, particularly in the beginning, that I was a commissioner, and they just saw me as a person of color, the responses towards me here in the Lehigh Valley were night and day. From when they found out, oh, he's a commissioner. Oh, well, I better treat him a different way, right? So what that video kind of embodies or illustrates is, when you think about those looks, someone said those looks had all of these inherent stereotypes and negative assumptions about him. That's what we call microaggressions. It's a perfect example of what microaggressions look like. Because when you hear microaggressions, the word aggressions, you think it's something more forceful, but it's micro, it's subtle. So let's dive in and talk specifically. Now, I'm going to give you in a few minutes what could certainly be a 4-hour workshop. So I want to give you the high levels, enough for you to be able to go and do some research on your own. But Dr. Chester Price, in 1970, Harvard professor, he is the gentleman that coined the phrase microaggressions. And he used it to describe the insults and the slights that he had seen that himself and other people of color were experiencing in America. Here's another video I want you to watch.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can I
Can I
touch
touch
your
it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
I love that video, and I apologize for some of the offensive language, but I thought it was a good video to kind of give you a really quick synopsis about microaggressions. So any initial responses, we're going to go into a little bit more depth, but any initial responses to what you just saw?
I thought it was terrific. Thank you for showing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Neil, are you raising your hand? I can't hear you. You're on mute, sir. Aaron, maybe you're able to. All right. Fortunately, we can't hear Neil. So let's talk about so what are microaggressions? You know, the mosquito video was a really neat, cool kind of synopsis. You know, but really they're intentional and unintentional. That's important. All microaggressions are not intentional. Some are unintentional. Some are conscious. Some are unconscious. Everyday verbal, behavioral, and environmental slights, snubs, insults that communicate you're not welcome. You're not one of us. You're other, or you're less than. Particularly focused towards marginalized groups. So that's what microaggressions are. They're every day. It's like the mosquito bites. Every day, nonstop. What are the types of microaggressions? Microaggressions come in three different forms, right? Three different types, rather. Verbal, comments, questions, statements, things that people say. Behavioral, the things that people do, right? That's hurtful or discriminatory. And environmental. And these, you know, the whole environmental piece is really about how subtle discrimination occurs within society. By environmental, it may look like this. It may look like a person of color being on a college campus, and it's a college campus where there's very, very few other people of color, and maybe every day they've got to walk past a statue to a Confederate general. Environmental. Things in the environment that undermine, things in the environment that negatively speaks to, that marginalizes, that reinforces disenfranchisement, that disparages a group. So they're verbal, they're behavioral, and they're environmental. There are 3 different forms that microaggressions take. The first one is micro assaults. These are explicit, conscious, and intentional, and they're intended to really hurt and degrade people. These are explicit, they're conscious, and they're intended to hurt and degrade people. Example of this is when you see racial slurs on a bathroom wall, or when someone tells a racist joke or an off-putting Jewish joke, and then they say, but I was just joking. I really didn't mean it. No, you meant that. No, that was intentional. Micro assaults. The next one is micro insults. Micro insults. This is a comment or an action that's unintentionally discriminatory. That's an important thing to understand. Again, not all microaggressions are intentional. This is unintentionally discriminatory, but it conveys and reinforces a sense of rudeness and insensitivity that demeans a person's racial heritage or identity. And we're talking about microaggressions specifically in reference to race, but these can be applied across a broad spectrum. Gender, sexual preference, it's applicable as a principle generally. Different type of a micro insult is saying, hey, to a person of a person of color who's a doctor, hey, man, your people must be so proud of you. Man, you represent your people very, very well. Oh, you're not like the rest of them. I wish I had a dime for every time I heard one of those. And then there's the micro invalidations. The micro invalidations is when a person's comments invalidates or undermines the experience of marginalized groups of people. Here's one that's very relevant to our time. It's when a white person tells a black person that racism doesn't exist in today's society. What you've just done is you've just invalidated my whole experience, because it's something that as a person of color, I experience daily. It's those mosquito bites. I've got thousands of them. You experience them daily, like in the video, the looks, the attitudes, the projections. And then we say, oh, it's not really that bad. Doesn't exist. That's a micro invalidation. You're telling me my experiences don't really matter. So I'm going to stop right there for a moment, because we're going to take it down to another level. But just on the surface, looking at those 3 things, what stands out for you when you think about micro assaults? This is the stuff that people intentionally and purposely do to cause harm. Micro insults, not necessarily intentional, could be unintentional, right? It demeans a person's heritage or identity. And then the invalidation, statements and things that are said or done to just invalidate entire groups of people. Thoughts? questions?
I had an experience recently, and afterwards I thought to myself, I don't know if that was the right thing to say or not. I was in a store, and there was a Black family with 7 or 8 children, and some of them were quite little, and we were standing on line to check out, and the children were so well behaved, and I just admired that. And I just couldn't resist telling the parents. And to me, it wasn't because they were Black. It was a family of 7 or 8 children, and they were so well behaved. And afterwards, I thought to myself, wow, did they think that I was looking down on them, my children, I would have expected them to be well behaved in that situation as well, and I only had 2. But I thought to myself afterwards, was that something that they thought, well, of course they should be well behaved? But you just don't see that often in any family. So I don't know if that was a microaggression or not.
I understand. My wife and I raised 5 kids, and taking 5 kids to the store was an adventure. You never knew what you were going to get, right?
Yeah.
But that's interesting, right? Because again, microaggressions, the micro assaults, those are conscious, those are purposeful. But when you think about the micro invalidations and the micro insults, those things are unintentional. But it's just like if somebody steps on your foot and they didn't mean to step on your foot, they did it by accident. Does it hurt any less?
Right.
Still hurts.
Right.
So can you just clarify? So would you consider what she said a microaggression or a micro insult? Would you consider that?
No, it's all in the mind of the receiver, right?
Yeah.
Because we are all prisoners of our own past and own experience. As someone that raised 5 kids, taking an army of kids to anywhere was a challenge to come back sane and intact.
Exactly.
I could understand that, but again, it's not so much, and we don't know what the thought process was or how the woman received it. I appreciate you bringing it up as a question of concern about your own actions, but we can never know and understand what's in the minds of the receiver.
Yeah, and they didn't know what was in my mind, why it was coming from me as the white person. Was it just a compliment or was it a put down?
So I threw this up here to answer your question, about was it or wasn't it? As a person who's often on the end of microaggressions, and again, you could take these principles and you can lay them over, not just being Black. As members of the Jewish community, you've experienced many microaggressions. And there's these thought processes that you have, and this is what this slide is intended to reflect. Did I interpret that correctly? Did she say what I think she said?
Right.
What did they really mean by that? There's all of these gymnastics and hurdles that you have to navigate through the day, particularly as a person of color in our society, that you're always jostling, right? And frankly, it can become very tiring and very taxing, right? Very tiring and very taxing. Here's what I want to do. Thank you for bringing it up. I want to show you these images here. And feel free, to jump in. We got about 15 minutes left. And then we'll have some questions. These are just some images that I just grabbed from media and society. And when you look at these images, so this one, right? It's for Nineveh, right? Face and body shave. I actually use it as an aftershave, right? But it says re-civilize yourself. And then look at the picture of what they deem as being not civilized. It's a man with an afro. So what are you saying about an ethnic style of people of color who have afros, right? Is that what they intended to say when they sat in the room, in the marketing room, and brainstormed ideals? Who knows? But microaggressions aren't in the heart so much of the sender as much as they are in the minds of the receiver. Here's another one, Dove. How many of us use Dove shower soap? And here's a picture. Look at the picture. If you want to get clean, you can get clean with Dove. And look how they describe being clean. Go from being a woman of dark skin to being a white woman. So to wash the dirt away. And we can look throughout society in our broad national marketing and in media and on television, and there are all of these microaggressions and messaging. And all of us are part of culture. We are all part of the society. We are all being programmed. We are all having negative stereotypes being reinforced subconsciously, which are solidifying and shaping biases from which microaggressions flow, intentionally or unintentionally. Here's some examples just to go a little bit deeper into what this kind of looks like. You can see there themes, the act, the microaggression, and then the message that it sends, right? So oftentimes, as you know, American citizens, those of us who do not come from the dominant group, right? And we talked last time about whiteness and what whiteness means in America in terms of privilege and access. The theme of, are you an alien in your own land? Where people say, hey, where are you really from? Well, my ancestors been here for 400 years. Take someone who is of a Latino background or experience, or somebody from another ethnic group. They may have been here for 2 generations. And what the message is, you aren't really an American, right? The microaggression is, where are you really from? Because you can't really be from here. The ascription of intelligence. And for those of us of African American descent, Black folk, we hear this all the time, and this just ruffles our feathers. I can tell you, this is, if you know a Black person, please don't tell them, oh, you're so articulate. This just ruffles our feathers, because there's an assumption there, right? And the person may be very well spoken, but there's an assumption there, and the assumption is, we're not really that intelligent. So man, if you can conjugate some verbs and put some stuff together, boy, you must really be smart, because, you know, most of y'all can't really speak well. The message is, it's unusual for someone of your race to be that intelligent. Or the theme of color blindness. Oh, when I look at you, I don't see color. What's the message it's sending? Denies my experience. If you look at me and you say, I don't see color, then what you're denying is, and what you're ignoring is the experience that people of color have in America. Because think about this. We don't say to a woman, I don't see gender. We don't say that. But when it comes to race, oh, I don't see race. That's a microaggression. You're saying you don't want to deal with the reality of my experience. The assumption of criminal status. One of the challenges that we're facing in America, and why there is such upheaval across our country right now, has to do with the theme, the assumption of criminal status. Black bodies are criminalized in our culture, in our society. That's why when you have a video of a police officer openly shooting an unarmed black man, he can go to court and say, I was scared. I was scared for my life. I had the gun. He didn't. I was scared. I had the gun and I was scared. He didn't have a gun, and the jury will let him off. Why? Because there's this assumption of a criminal status of black and brown bodies. So when you walk into the store, a store owner follows a person of color. You're probably not going to meet many people of color who will not tell you that story, because I can guarantee you it happens on a regular, consistent basis. And it implies you're going to steal. Or if you take something back to the store, even if you have the receipt, you get a hard time because they think you stole it. Just imagine never getting the benefit of the doubt. Just imagine what is it like to never get the benefit of the doubt. It's a constant microaggression. Or the last one, the denial of individual racism. The microaggression is, my best friend is black. Or as a woman, I know what you go through. Or I grew up poor and we made it. Why can't you? The message is, I'm immune because I have friends of color, and your racial oppression is not different than my gender oppression, or your condition is not different than my economic condition. The reason why you're there is you didn't want to work hard to get out. All of these are just, and again, these are broad brushes, and I'm given like a 10,000 foot level, and I'm trying to bring it down without getting into detailed specifics for the sake of time, but to provide a kind of general sense of what microaggressions look like and feel like across a wide spectrum of experiences. And then these are we touched on this earlier, these are the questions that we have to ask ourselves and navigate all the time. These thought bubbles, this is every day, particularly here in the Lehigh Valley, as a black man who I have been very, very fortunate to have access to positions and platforms of power, to have influence where people of power value my opinion, invite me to the table. But at the same time, when I'm at that table, here's all the bubbles. Here's all the stuff I've got to deal with. Here's all the mosquito bites that you've got to deal with. And it just becomes a burden to have to carry every day. But it comes with the territory. And you just have to buck up. Because this is the experience. This is what it means. And again, the big thing to realize is most of these microaggressions, they're not intentional. They're not done by people who want to intentionally cause individuals hurt or harm, but it really goes back to this model and understanding that unless we're able to recognize and address stereotypes and identify these negative stereotypes that are operating within our minds, and be able to identify the biases that they're shaping and forming, we won't be able to effectively be able to deal with microaggressions. Now, I'm going to end here with this question here. Someone said, well, what can we do about it? You know, what can we do? How do we make a difference? How do we get better? Here's some simple tactics you can do. Listen to the people on the receiving end. and be empathetic to their feelings. Ask people. Like if you had the opportunity to go back into that supermarket, hey, did what I say offend you? And be willing and to be open. Be empathetic. Don't be defensive or dismiss the person's feelings. That really didn't hurt that bad. I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean to offend. That's being defensive. We have to get rid of our defensiveness. We have to be willing to take responsibility for the underlying bias that is informing the microaggression. Stereotypes, biases lead to microaggressions. Taking responsibility. What are my biases? Remember, biases are malleable. You can change them. You may have been shaped and conditioned by family systems, by environment, by society, but you can change them. You can change that input, that data, that programming of your subconscious. And then you have to take steps to become more educated. What do I mean by being more educated? Read, inform yourself, expose yourself to different cultures, expose yourself to African American culture, to Latino culture. As a person, as a Black person, I am forced to be culturally competent. I have to navigate in the world. Here's a question for you to think about. When was the last time you went to see a movie that was quote unquote a Black movie? A movie that had Black leading actors, Black stars, and on the surface it looked like it was a Black movie. Or do you say, that's a Black movie because it's got Black people in it. That's not for me. Not going to watch that. That will help to educate, to inform. It'll help to address the paradigms, the stereotypes that inform biases that fuel microaggressions. Read a book. There's a great book out called Anti-Racist. There's a great book by Robin DiAngelo called White Privilege. And then lastly, you have to be committed to changing microaggressive behaviors. Have to make up your mind that, you know what, I'm going to change. Because the longest journey begins with the first step. It's a commitment to think differently, to respond differently, to act differently. Then if we're able to do that, here's what's at stake for all of us in this. For all of us. I love this quote from Dr. King. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with people who, Black or white, doesn't matter, only want to judge a person by his or her race? In other words, we all know we're living in a very divisive atmosphere now, and, with almost everything. And there are people who feel that if you're Black, then this is what you should be thinking. And if you don't think that way, you're wrong, you're this, whatever, I don't know. And it's almost as if they feel like the individual is not the importance. It's like the individual is not important. It's only his or her race that determines how he or she should behave and think and act and everything else.
I was trying to go back. I was trying to go back to a slide, but I messed up. Here's what I would say, because that's a great question, right? And if you take this model, it overlays that question, because it begins with a stereotype, and the stereotype is all of them think the same, or all of us should think alike, right? That's a stereotype. We have stereotypes about those outside of our group, and we have stereotypes about those inside our group. My daughters, they grew up, and when they went to school, we grew up on 15th Street, brought my first home on 15th Street, right down from Allen High School. My daughters went to school, and I made my daughters read the dictionary and the encyclopedias. I made them look up words, build the vocabulary. And they were always accused by their friends as quote unquote talking white. Well, where did that come from? Because there was an internal stereotype about, well, this is how Black people talk, right? So your question really has to do with the formation of these internal stereotypes about what our group is and how our group thinks and how our group should respond. And the truth is, there is no group that is a monolith. There's no group of people who all think alike, see things alike, respond to things alike. So, the response to individuals like that is to reinforce the individuality of individuals. We have ethnic identities, we have racial identities, but at the core, we are individuals with our own experiences. Any other questions?
I have a question. It's Marilyn. My picture isn't up here, but I'm listening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I know we don't want to get into politics, but in this divisive world that we're living in now, where every day we see these horrific things on the screen, we don't only see it, but children see it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think this is going to do to this? We now are in the 21st century. I feel like we're going backwards instead of forwards. How do you overcome what these kids are seeing on the screen and the stereotypes that it seems like we've gone back to the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, what is most concerning is that you think 12 years ago, if we can all remember 12 years ago,
mm-hmm.
We had hair back then 12 years ago, but President Obama, the first Black president, was elected, and we all thought we had turned the corner as a nation and that we were living in a post-racial society.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that since his election, race relations and division in America has increased. And I share the same concerns about what young people, kids, are being exposed to and what is becoming norm and acceptable again in the public discourse in America. There's been a lot of criticism expressed over the years about political correctness. But I think what political correctness served to silence damaging, hateful, divisive rhetoric. It drove it underground. It didn't get rid of it, drove it underground. Mm-hmm. It became a kinder society, but that's not the case any longer.
Right. I mean, I just think that it is so, I find it so difficult. I try not to watch, I try to just to listen at 11 o'clock at night and get a summary of the day's activities. But I feel that because of the 24/7 news cycle, that we're seeing things that were hidden before. These things went on, we just didn't know about it, or it wasn't publicized as much.
Yeah, there have been, there have been members of the marginalized communities within our country that have been saying that the things that we're seeing openly right now have been going on for a long time, and everyone's saying, you're oversensitive, you're making it up, but it's here, and that's why conversations like this are so important, because it helps us to first check and evaluate ourselves, our own behaviors, our own attitudes, our own internalized biases and stereotypes, to make sure that we are not contributing to the problem, but we're providing solutions to the problem. Because at the end of the day, we can only control our own actions.
Right, that's true. Right.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you for your good answer, because that is true. We can only control our own actions.
Wendy, I see you have your hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I do. Yes. You've talked a little bit about if you are the person who is, I guess, giving a microaggression, but what if you're on the receiving end? For example, what you said about your daughters in the dictionary and the encyclopedia, what are some of the ways that you suggest people deal with microaggressions against them?
Well, I'm going to give you my perspective, and not a lot of people in my community share my perspective when it comes to this issue. Trying to figure out how to say it short and concise. You have to be bigger and better.
Mm-hmm.
You can't let it's hard, but you can't. I train my kids. You can't let the limitations of others prevent you from rising as far as you can. Mm-hmm. And you just have to know who you are, to be solidified in who you are. So when someone comes to me, I'll tell you a quick story. I'm trying to be sensitive to time, but all of you guys know the postal stamps that you peel and stick now. Everybody use those? Like, remember there was a day when we actually licked postal stamps, right? You now peel and stick them. Well, those postal stamps were developed in Quakertown at a company called Avery Dennison. They had a large, it's still there today on California Road and Pan Am Drive. I started working there in 1994 because they got a federal contract. And because they had the federal contract, of course, they had to hire people of color. And I was the first person of color that they hired, and I was working on the factory floor. And every day for about 9 months, I was called every racial epithet that you could imagine to my face. In the break room, watermelon jokes, fried chicken jokes, the N-word, monkey boy, all of that. This is 1994. Well, at the time, I had a wife, I had 4 kids. I needed to put shoes on their feet, and milk was expensive, and shoes were expensive. And they were paying $21 an hour in 1994. So when they would come in my face and tell me all this, I had to think about the bigger picture. And I wouldn't allow myself to be reduced to them and to allow their insults to define me. So you call me the N-word, now I'm going to get upset and fight you? I must believe that's what I am. I didn't do that. And what ended up happening was when management found out that this was going on, they asked me if I would be willing to sign a complaint and that they would have the guys fired. I said, no, I can't do that. They said, why? I said, listen, number one, I'm a Christian and I can't have that on my conscience. Those guys got wives and kids. I can't have them suffering because of their husband's ignorance. And number two, if you fire them, I'm the guy that got everybody's friends fired. That's not going to make my situation any better. It'll make it worse. And I asked them to let me handle it in my own way. Long story, when I brought my very first house, those same gentlemen that called me every racial epithet you could imagine brought their wives and their kids to my housewarming party. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that faith requires me to be bigger, to respond differently, to see the person as a person in need because something's wrong with them. They're deficient of something. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean it's a weight that doesn't lighten the weight anymore. But specifically about how do you respond, you just have two choices. You can let it control you and dictate you, and that ends up making you bitter. And we've seen people that way, and angry and hostile and distrusting of everyone. Or you can elevate and rise above that. I choose the latter.
Oops. I'm going to break in here. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I think that's such a beautiful way to end your presentation, David. I think you inspire us with your hope that your experience does matter and we can learn from your experience. I was going to say how articulate you are, but I'm not going to say it anymore because I know that would be an insult. So we need to listen. We need to hear what you're saying. We need to grow and we need to understand your narrative. We need to understand the narrative of people who are different than us. And what an incredible way to very soon it will be our Jewish New Year. And we will be celebrating the new year. And it's a time when we can really look at what we've done wrong and where we've sinned and the mistakes we've made, and we can go forward and learn more. And we're really hoping this year that this will be a year for us with everything going on. We need to listen and we need to learn and we need to understand the narrative of your experience of other people who are different than we are. And we just need to do a lot of work in this area. And I'm very proud that I work at Jewish Family Service with Rabbi Judah and our board. And I'm very proud that I work with Jerry Zimmerman, who's of the Federation, and Aaron Gordinsky, who were so excited about welcoming you and having your presentation. And you've helped us launch such an opportunity to learn. And I thank all of you who participated tonight. And I hope more people will look at our website because you really give us hope, David. Your experience teaches us that there is a burden, but we can't give up on helping people understand more. So thank you so much. A great message, very inspiring.
If I can say something very quickly, it is our responsibility as a Jewish community to register to vote and to vote in the elections, regardless of who you support as a candidate, who you support for Congress, who you support for president. From now until the election, we're putting this slide at the end of all of our programs to make sure that everybody's registered to vote. If you're not, or if you're not sure, you can go to the votespa.com website. You know, you can vote by mail, you can vote in person, but you have to vote. It's our responsibility as a Jewish community to have our voices heard, and we cannot complain unless we vote. So I encourage everybody to be there, to make your voices heard, to register to vote, and just to finish, to vote on November 3rd or before. You make the choice of how you want to vote, but you should be voting. And with that, we say thank you to everybody and wish everybody a happy and healthy new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
I'm going to